I'm predicting the future now. 20 years from now, I'm sitting here with you. We're going to be talking about food as nutrition. And we're going to be talking about food as nutrition that starts with seed and soil. The idea that we're not is as if, it's like smoking a pack a day around a newborn. It's like, it's so stupid. You look back at it, you're like, what were you thinking? We're going to look back on food and nutrition and think, what were we thinking?
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals. You just heard from well-known chef and author Dan Barber, who is also the co-founder of Row 7 Seeds, which describes itself as a seed company dedicated to deliciousness. We've spoken to Dan many times over the years, and his vision of a food system rooted in taste is as compelling as ever. He's been working to reconnect the seed to the table, advocating for return to farming for flavor, which of course always starts with choosing nutritious seeds and building healthy soil. Today, he takes us deeper into what it means to grow food that truly tastes like itself, and why the loss of flavor in our crops tells a much bigger story about our industrial food system. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast.
You're surrounded by real organic.
We're surrounded by real organic.
This isn't just a prop. This is the thing. I wish your cameras could see the 8 acres of spring bounty about to descend on us from the hilltop over there.
I know.
10 acres.
Good. Let's start talking a little bit about stone barns.
Yeah.
I just was at your amazing
Did I ever tell you
day.
the story about Elliot picked this field?
Yes.
Did I tell you that?
Tell me.
No, did I tell you?
Yeah, I know.
I don't want to repeat myself.
Yeah, it's
I tell the
okay.
same
Amazing story.
Stories the whole time. But we had chosen the field is over there, and then I was with him right there, 2002, and he stopped short and ran into this field, up and down and back and forth like a gazelle. And then I'll never forget, he walked back to me and said, "This is our field." I never understood until many years later that he wanted something that was close to the dairy.
Yeah.
And he was, in retrospect, so brilliant. And at the time, I just thought, God, this guy who I've learned so much from found a spirit calling in the field and chased after it, and then decided that's where we're going to put the vegetables. But what he told me is he reasoned that the dairy farmers, when they would pasture the cows, wanted them closest to the barn because it was the shortest walk to the milking at 5 o'clock in the morning.
So this is where they spent
most mineralized
field,
and therefore would provide the best vegetables. The 50 years or 70 years of incredible manuring of that field, and he's right. The vegetables that come out of there are just unreal.
Yeah.
Makes me look like a better chef every day, Dave.
Well, that's you took the brilliant shortcut, which is to have the best ingredients for the food.
Yeah.
So, can we talk about the evolution, where Stone Barns is going? So Stone Barns is this, for people who don't know it, whoever those might be, hard to believe, is this amazing combination of a brilliant farm growing beautiful real organic vegetables, real organic meat, some real organic grain, and a top-end restaurant, Blue Hill at Stone Barns, preparing it to be absolutely delicious.
Yeah. That you just described the 20 years, which we're now celebrating. And now we're in our 21st year, and we're looking for the next 20. So what is the next 20? When we're sitting here in 20 years, Dave, what are we saying we've done? And it's less about the vectors pointing to the farm and to the restaurant and that relationship, which we call farm to table, which has so much to inspire and to excite and energize a generation around the direct connections between a farmer and eating. But how can we take those connections and that relationship and get it out of here? How can the vectors point out and democratize what we're looking at and what we're tasting? Because what we're seeing over 20 years of work is that while most of these ideas have been celebrated through my menu and through Blue Hill, there is an opportunity to democratize the flavor, the nutrition, and the farmer equity. What does the farmer need to grow in the field in a particular rotation, a particular variety, particularly family of vegetable, a particular animal, as part of a rotation for a really healthy ecosystem. What we used to call organic and now we call regenerative.
Some of us call it real organic.
Sorry, real organic. No, it's good. That's why I'm talking to you, because the definition is so important. Because as you know, you can dumb down organic to what it is today, or you can be what it should be, which is this conceit. The conceit is, I say it's a conceit because I think it's a bold statement that it's so simply bold that we don't stop to consider it enough, which is, can we produce agriculture that's not less bad? Can we produce agriculture that improves an environment, that improves an ecological functioning? That often goes unasked. And it's at the core of what I have read of the organic movement. The spirit of it is how could you create an ecosystem and a community around an idea of improvement? And we now have, here we are 60 years later, with the definition being, let's just do less bad. How much less bad can we do? And we get celebrated for how much less bad. And we have to turn that idea around. And what we are seeing is these ideas that are incubated in a very privileged environment. Let's call it what it is, Dave. This is very privileged.
Yes.
But we are finding that these ideas have legs. Buckwheat is not a privileged crop. Buckwheat is actually a poor soil crop. And buckwheat is a magical rotation crop. That's not of the purview of the white tablecloth restaurant charging $450 a person every night, which is what we do. But in fact, is really a miracle and should be in nearly every region around us anyway, in this environment. And so dairy cow is another one. You had a taste of dairy cow earlier. Those are animals with stupefying deliciousness and nutrition that is being fed to the dog food chain or to the fast food burger chain because they are considered degraded meat. So we're figuring out processes to take these genetics and hone in on them, dry off the cows, have the fat return to the meat and marbling, and create something that just defies imagination. I mean, Wagyu beef, it makes Wagyu beef look like a sick grand, cousin. It's so, and yet Wagyu beef, we were sitting here 20 years ago when we opened, was nothing. And nobody knew what Wagyu beef was here. Now you can get a Wagyu hamburger at a joint in New York for $18. I mean, it's gone from 0 to 60 overnight. And I think something like dairy cow or buckwheat or the whole host of ideas that you saw this morning can take shape and form in a way that is very accessible. And I think that's the goal of the next 20 years for our work together. It's not to have the vectors point at me or Blue Hill. It's that the learning and the incubation of these ideas spreads, not scales, spreads, right? And that's the key. I think you saw that around. Don't ask me how this scales, ask me how this spreads. Because scaling is how we got into this mess, as you know better than I do. We got into this mess because we drive to the lowest common denominator. So that doesn't mean that buckwheat grows in every region. It doesn't mean that dairy cows should be, and that dairy should be practiced in every region. There's regional niches for which we should be exploiting in a good way, digging down, drilling into a regional context that is rich with, and every region is rich. That's what I said. I was just talking to someone the other day. And they were investing in a blue zone thing, one of those blue zone deals. I'm just like, I don't know, what is it really like? The Okinawa sweet potato is like this magic. What? It's like, this is a blue zone. It's a blue zone. Right here is a blue zone. We just haven't mined for it yet. We don't have the history, we don't have the community, and we don't have the ecological intelligence, as Wes Jackson might say, to exploit it for richness. And that just seems like an opportunity waiting to happen. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to take the niche and create a blue zone because we know we have it. Everyone has it.
So you have to build, as well as this kind of biological sophistication, we also need to build a social network.
Nicely said.
An important part of this.
Nicely said. Although the organic dictate would be the biological What'd you say, the biological what? I love that.
I don't know what I said.
Resiliency. Is connected to the social resiliency,
That's right.
It has to be. And that's why organic is an organism, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not one part, and we've obviously dumbed it down. But yes, you're right. If you don't have the market excitement, if you don't have the food culture pulling this, then you could be the most exalted farmer in the world. But then it stays in places that are elitist.
I've always been struck by the difference between Elliot Coleman and another wonderful farmer who has never spoken aloud about what he or she is doing, and they have incredible food for their customers.
Who's that? Don't want to name it.
There are dozens of them.
Yeah.
But Elliot was unusual in that he also has incredible food. Anyone who's lucky enough to be a customer and go and eat.
And he wrote a book too.
He wrote several books.
Yeah, but he
he's got
wrote
a
one
third
book.
coming.
Right, I know. I'm writing the introduction for it right now. I'm trying to think of how to frame it. But I think he was able to articulate his ideas in a way that people could understand.
In the book and in many speaking engagements,
Sure.
many articles. My point is, Elliot he had the skill set, the ability, the temperament to be public about it. And so what he did became a model for many people.
Yes.
And I've run into them all over the place. Well,
You're running into him here.
Elliot's book changed my life.
And I'm a chef because of Elliot.
That's
so
right. That's right.
You're right.
And so we owe the people who are able to do that. We don't need to worship them. We need to appreciate that they did that and thank them. Say thank you for being so loud about this.
Yes.
Okay. And I think what you're imagining is very similar, which is that we have an awesome restaurant. I have eaten here as your guest, I will say, and you do amazing stuff. But how do we make this a gift to many people who will never eat here?
Yes.
Still be touched by it.
Yes, that's the goal. And what we're seeing as ideas that I said are incubated here that have the potential to spread in a way that produces scale. But we have to differentiate between the two. So we want to become a playbook for what a hyper-regional food economy really looks like.
Yes.
And it has to be a food economy that benefits the farmers who are farming, and the ecology that they're farming from has to. Otherwise, it's not a real economy. It's an economy that's not sustainable. As we say, it won't last. So what's one that lasts? And one way to look at food economies that last is through cuisine. Cuisine is the dictate. It's how the pieces come together. It's where the rubber hits the road. And if you study cuisines, they are the best, they're the soothsayers, they're the foretellers of what remains intact in an ecological system. Because if you have the food culture mimicking what the agriculture can give you, then you have something that's very fragile, as we know time and again.
Yes.
But is the surefire sign that something is working because it's worked for a hell of a long time. And those traditions, whether they're personal traditions, family traditions, religious traditions, community traditions, regional traditions, they are all mimicking the landscape and what you could eke out from a landscape. And that in and of itself is a sustainable way to think about it. Here, we're so young, we were so rich, soil health, agriculturally, environmentally, rich, too rich. So we've been living off the hog, high on the hog, as they say. And we were never, as you know, this country was never forced into the kind of negotiations that people from every corner of the world have had to negotiate. America is just this terrible example of richness, and without those forced negotiations, living off the cream. Unfortunately, we're exporting that idea to the rest of the world.
I was going to say, I was once fortunate enough to go to China with a Tai Chi school, 200 of us driving around China, being put on display as the barbarians who were doing Tai Chi. Our teacher was Chinese. And the food that I ate on the street, not in the restaurants, on the street, was probably the best food I've ever eaten.
Yeah.
Just
the best.
Unbelievable.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, any one of these little street stands, if they had a restaurant in the U.S., their success would be unending. But probably they would also be the challenge of now we have to scale up. And then
True.
the golden goose would have disappeared.
Sure.
I've heard that obesity is becoming a world epidemic now.
Yeah, we're exporting our genius to everybody.
Our
and it's a shame.
Craziness.
But what you touch on is, as much as we desperately need a new generation of farmers to be energized by this work out here, we need this work over here, and I'm pointing to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because we need a generation of chefs and cooks who don't feel the need to drive and dumb down and commoditize. And that's a very hard thing to be arguing for. But that's why that's what I spend my day with, is young, incredibly smart, thoughtful generation of cooks who want to do the right thing and want to be trained to do it. And my hope is that they go out there and think in regional context. Look, I think if we're also talking 20 years for what the hell I'll predict the future, I think we're all going to retrench. I think that's where we're headed. It's a grand retrenchment. This idea of shipping calories and nutrition from one corner of the world to the next it's going to become a very old idea. I think it already is, and in many ways. In restaurants, it's sort of starting that way. If you think about restaurants, I think I talked to you about this before, but I'll say it again. You think about restaurants 40 years ago, not that long ago, 40 years ago, they were measured by the same dish that was presented in different areas. I mean, you went to fine dining in America, you essentially ate from a list of, a couple dozen dishes. But generation before that, it was really just a dozen dishes, in regions of France. And it wasn't the ingenuity, it was how well you prepared the classic dish. And that rubbed off on America for a long time. But now, I mean, the whole world is just opened up. Like, in fact, that's the sign of a death of a restaurant. Right now, the restaurants that are thriving, truly thriving, not just busy and well supported, but also just are considered the top restaurants. That's the people who are judging. These are restaurants that are so individualistic that you have to travel there to get that experience. And when you travel there to get that experience, it's about experiencing a region. It's about experiencing a place. That's a very new idea. I can't stress that enough. In America, on a high end, on fine dining restaurants, it's a very new idea. And that is becoming more and more of a necessity as the younger generation gets older. They don't want to spend their money on one size fits all. The Gap clothing store kind of idea that you get your same shirt wherever you are in every region. That was the restaurants not long ago. That's changed. That's going to trickle down, and I have a few. My worry is that we won't be able to produce food in a regional context for very long. As you know, it's just, especially real organic food, it's just been a horrible 20 years, 30 years. But I believe we're at the moment where that switch is coming, and part of this is fashion and fashion and desire and what people are willing to pay for. And I believe that there's a turn is coming.
That's great. Do you remember what year the third plate came out?
Do I remember very well. I wrote it for 12 years, and it came out in 2014. Yeah.
Okay, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And you started it 12 years before.
Yeah.
So since that book came out, or since you were in the middle of writing it, do you think that the food system has gotten better or worse?
Worse. I think I hate to sound like my grandfather who would complain about everything, but I think we're in an existential moment. I was just in California at some big organic farms, the kind of farms that you would not, you would frown on. As a one that's, I almost wrote you, because I was one that's 2,000 acres of diverse vegetable farming. And I went there with just an open mind. I'm thinking about writing something, and I'm Row 7's the vegetable company that we're contracted with all these farmers across the country. So I'm visiting them and getting to know, and some of them are just big scale. And this guy is 2,000 acres, and he's very diversified in a way that's almost like what you're looking at out here. It's the math on this thing is bonkers. They're at 40 acres, each of the 20 acres, 15 acres, but nothing is planted in the same place for 5 years. Tons of soil amendments, cover cropping, big cover cropping, compost owns a compost company, and he's just huge on scales that just boggle the freak. There are 180 combine size for levelers, those levelers, the soil levelers. He has 180 of them, $750,000 a pop. I mean, it's just incredible value. This is in Watsonville. And so you want to go there and sneer and say, this is industrial organic. And then you get there and you're just like, he inherited this land, so it's not like he's trying to take over everyone. He's big scale. And he's trying to do the right thing. Yeah. It's very clean food. I still think it's a little bit of a mining operation. Yeah. But, he looks at me when I talk to him about, well, what about diversifying grains and animals? He's just like, what are you talking about? Like, the fact that I actually diversify any vegetables is, his neighbors and neighbors' neighbors and neighbors' neighbors are doing, he took me to a field where there was 35 years of Brussels sprouts on Brussels sprouts on Brussels sprouts on Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
Just all the way through.
Yeah.
And they thought they were, organic and enlightened. I mean, it's just incredible. And I don't know, I came away from that experience feeling so, because he's not, the end result was like, he's not really doing that well. It's a huge business, and labor is so tight, water issues, and then competition. The biggest thing he said, that's why I almost wrote you. It's not labor, it's not water, although those are really fraught compared to 10 years ago when I was writing the third plate. The biggest problem is big conventional farms getting into organic, just saying, okay, all of a sudden we're organic. They'll spend the 3 years on the conversion. They do it. They flood into Kroger's and all these people that he supplies, and they do it cheaper. And now the price of organics come down, and they're like, ooh, this doesn't make sense anymore. So now what they've done post-COVID is these industrial farms have continued organic at the absolute lowest possible definition of what organic is. And even if they are, that's a whole nother thing. But okay, even if they are the lowest common, with size that dwarfs him, with machinery that dwarfs him, and they're taking a loss on it so they're saying to Kroger's, you don't have to buy from two people, buy from us. Here's organic, here's our price. They're losing money on it, but they're undercutting this guy, okay? He's not a small Elliott Coleman guy, 2,000 acres, okay, but he's undercutting him, but they want the sale on the conventional. And so they keep it in one account. And I didn't understand this, but he's saying people like Kroger's and Albertsons and increasingly others that we like are trying to bundle, so they're not playing with lots of different farms because it's more expensive. And they get these big contracts and they use organic as the loss leader to get in there.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
He said it's just killing us. He's like, there's no way that I could possibly compete with that.
Right. It's amazing. And not to diminish the impact of labor, because he's paying 20 times what a worker would cost in Mexico.
And I said, isn't that,
times.
Yeah, I said, and with immigration issues, like when he started, I said when I was writing the third plate, I brought this up, it's like 2000, what was it like? He's, for workers. He's like, I'd show up to work, there'd be 100 people waiting to work. There was never one day where I didn't have excess labor. Now I can't, I plow under fields because I don't have anyone to pick.
Yeah.
But I said, oh my God, it's your biggest problem. It's not my biggest problem. Then he went on to talk about the corporate dumping of organic.
Yeah.
And how the hell do you compete with that?
Right.
Because those guys are just getting richer. Then he was taking me, you keep drilling down to it, and he takes me to the machinery that they have that he doesn't have. So it almost compounds itself. It's like, so the labor's hurting, right? But what he needs is more robotics. It's really what he needs. All these farms that are this size need robotic weeding. And he can't afford it because his margins are just going down. While the other guys, the margins are going up and they're getting the latest in AI weeding robotics. He was showing me what's out there. Oh my God, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now this is not an Elliott Coleman guy. This is a guy who has 180, $750,000 tractors that run by satellite. They all run on satellite. I'm watching the fields. The guy's just laying back because you have to be in the tractor. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. The rule is you have to be in the tractor.
And then 50 feet from the end of the row, it shakes you to wake you up.
And exactly. I watched that. I was like, oh my God, this is out of a futuristic thing.
Right.
And yet, so who's the enemy here? Is the industrial organic guy who's actually organic and actually diversified and actually concentrating on soil. not in the way that we do, but who the hell could at his? And then you could say, well, why is he that size? It's like, I don't know, I think it was handed to him and he'd be out of business. Everyone around him who is smaller is out. So then what? And then you're like, okay, you proved your point. It's too big. So, okay, I left there feeling so freaking depressed. I was like, what is the answer to this? I don't know. So that's my answer to you. Is it worse? From what I'm seeing, it's infinitely worse. And you know what, Dave? I'll tell you something. Michael Pollan said this to me not that long ago. But when he says something in his way, it's always so smart. I feel like it's the smartest guy in the world.
I know he's like the smartest guy in the world.
And he said, in 2006 and 7, which is really when I was in the midst of the book, it's like we were indomitable. The farm to fork movement was just, we were too confident that it was the future. And what we didn't understand or grapple with enough was the power of food industry. And I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. That was probably 5 years ago. Today, now I'm just like, of course, he's right. And I think the recognition, the wide scale push for local food, regional food, it's died a little bit. It's died. It is not, organic may be growing and that's questionable, but it seems like it is. But the oh god damn, just got stung by a bee there. But the push for local food.
8 years ago, we sold to a bunch of chains in the Northeast, and they all had a local program.
Right.
And they were serious. It wasn't all of their stuff, but they were serious. Local growers were really being invited in.
Yeah.
They wanted to give them shelf space.
How many years ago?
It was around 2016, 17.
Yeah.
And they sent film crews to film
Right,
us,
sure.
with models, so somebody looked good in the picture. And now they're all gone. That's all gone.
All gone.
All that local buying is gone for all of them.
And I don't know what happened. Michael's point was the industry fought back, but I is that right? I don't know how that works that way.
Well, one thing that happened is that all of those chains have been bought by a multinational.
Yeah, there you
that I
go.
sold
That's
to.
true.
All
That's
of them.
true.
And it was always
But a
3 years later, everything changed.
Okay, but a multinational who was confronting a real market for differentiated local product that they're willing to pay a little bit more for would respond to that. They wouldn't just drop it. It seems like the interest is also waned, and I don't get that one.
It is hard to say, though. Honestly, we used to sell a lot of our crop to Stop and Shop, which was before Walmart came in. It was kind of the big dog, and they didn't drop us. They said, we can't afford to pay your price. And I said, we haven't raised our price in 20 years. What are you talking about? And we had very dedicated following there. Sales weren't down, but they were bought by Ahold USA, a Dutch multinational, and they said, well, we got to cut our prices, just as a matter of principle. And that pushed out any local differentiated products. So I don't feel it was customers. I feel it was a corporate decision from somebody way, way at the top who's saying, this is how it's going to be. I think this is how we, and at that point they were saying, this is how we compete with Walmart.
Right.
Which for sure is this Goliath. I mean, it's bigger than, the next 5 put together?
Yeah.
It's certainly the biggest vendor of certified organic food in the world.
Yeah, they're driving it.
They're driving it. So, but the one hope I have is Michael answered it the same way as you, that it's getting worse. But he said, I asked Michael the same question about it after Omnivore's Dilemma. And he said, but what's gotten better is the conversation. The public awareness is much better. This is now something that my students at Harvard are talking about. They weren't talking about this 15 years ago.
Good point. Good point. I hope that leads to more action. But what I'm seeing is, look, we're importing over 50% of our vegetables now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's more scary than that? A country like ours that is reliant for its food on other countries.
Well,
what more of a wake-up call is that?
It's a little creepier to me. which is we're importing about 2/3 of our certified organic soy and about half of our certified organic corn.
No.
Now the other things you go, okay, they're paying
Right.
1/20th of what we are in
Right.
labor, and these are high labor crops. Soy and corn, we're supposed to be the best in the world.
Right.
Why are we importing stuff that's certified as organic, but none of us actually believes it is?
Yeah. Right. That's another.
That's a different kind of a thing.
I was just talking to a fish guy who started a company called Dr. Dish, which is supporting fishermen in Montauk, which is right here, to get a fair price for fish. And man, talk about a decimated industry. I mean, the average age of the fishermen in Montauk is 65. It's like farmers, the same idea. But today we import 90% of our fish. How much fish do you think we export? 94%. And it's just like, I wish you could have talked to him. He'd be a great interview.
Yeah.
He said, we're the last generation, because none of these boats have a 30-year-old on them, 40-year-old. They're all 60. They all paid for their boats, so for them, they're just going their time. They're running out. And he's like, unless this were really to change, and again, it's the corruption. You know, I'm not much of the corruption guy. I don't like going there. I don't think people hear it so much, their eyes glaze over. But he was telling me about a fluke. It was a very popular fish that can sell on menus, and he's paying his fishermen 35 cents a pound, or sorry. He's paying his fishermen 35 cents a pound for beautiful Montauk fluke. And by the way, when the fluke get to Montauk, they're in the most pristine, fatty, unbelievable condition. And Virginia, which is not that far down the coast here, their haul, minimum haul is 15,000. In Montauk, it's 1,500 pounds. That's it. You can't take it because it's well regulated, very well regulated. But Virginia is 15,000. So the guys in Virginia, they come up to Montauk and they fish, and then they go back down to Virginia and they sell it and undercut them by 35 cents. And he said, well, I can't even sell fluke anymore because chefs are just looking at that. And people are just looking at the price difference per pound and won't do it. But there's no understanding that the goddamn fish it's so screwed up. You're completely at the mercy of unregulated industry. Actually, it's not unregulated. The harm of it, the pain of it, is that it is regulated in certain areas, and then you get outside the area, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's like there's no way out. It's frightening.
It seems that the only way to, food as medicine is a great new movement. It's not a new movement.
Right.
It's a very old.
As someone who's
movement.
going to Joan Gussow's memorial on Monday, it's a very old movement.
It's a very old movement, but it's gotten wind in its sails lately. There's it's being pumped up. It's being talked about. One of the things that bothers me about it is they don't really talk about organic.
Well, they don't talk about soil health or any of that. It's as if it's disconnected from your health, and that's what Joan was talking about in the 70s. And you're right. It's by the way, that's what we're talking about. We're just not doing it through nutrition, because I'm not wearing the other white coat. I'm wearing this white coat. But you're right. It's like there's a wide open opportunity. We know. I'm predicting the future now. 20 years from now, I'm sitting here with you. We're going to be talking about food as nutrition, and we're going to be talking about food as nutrition that starts with seed and soil. The idea that we're not is as if it's like smoking a pack a day around a newborn. It's like it's so stupid. You look back at it, you're like, what were you thinking? We're going to look back on food and nutrition and think, what were we thinking? And I hope we can get the science enough right, because as you know, science is so goddamn tricky. It depends on who's doing it and how we're doing it. And so, as Joan herself said, it's very nearly impossible to measure these things, not individually, holistically. Individually you can do it, but holistically it's like, no, you can't. And that's what people need, is just numbers that are very clear, black and white. And it drives me nuts. But I think there's a wide open opportunity to put a positive spin about it. That's what I'm telling our cooks. You want to get in the food business? This is the future. We're not going to allow nutritionalist food to be defined as nutrient dense. We won't in the future. And the only way you're going to get it is from real soil, and it's going to come from local farms.
Yeah.
And people are going to be willing to pay more for it. And the government's going to get involved. And look at now, the government's getting involved actually. For however you view that. It is interesting that conversation, I'm sure for you it must be so gratifying to see it happening.
Well, something is happening and we see what happens next, but it is amazing for the first time to have leading political figures agreeing with us.
It's incredible. You know? On a side of the fence that you would never imagine.
No, and it's become bipartisan, that agreement. There isn't much bipartisan, but on that one, actually there is widespread agreement.
Totally.
Whether
very
we get the change, we will see.
Yeah.
We're on Michael, his food koan, eat food, mostly plants, not too much.
Yeah.
All right, what is that, 7 words?
Yeah.
Amazing. I wrote him, I said, Michael, I just gave a talk and I added 3 more words to it. I'm sorry, but I said mostly real organic.
Yeah.
And I said, I think this is very important. And he wrote back and said, I do too. So thank you. You know, I didn't want to mess up the beauty of the 7 words, but to leave out the fact of how that food is grown, it's not right.
No.
We need to talk about it.
Right. I'm doing it through deliciousness because I don't think you can talk about anything. I don't think you can talk about the importance of that without someone getting excited about the flavor. But like I said, it seems like nutrition is getting people, and there's another way in.
So let's talk about deliciousness.
By the way, deliciousness and nutrition are the same conversation. So in 20 years, when we're sitting here, guy who hates making predictions, I'll make another one. We're going to be seeing the correspondence between flavor and nutrition as one and the same. That's a big one. That's a big one. We, for some reason, I think it's our Puritan background, we don't have an understanding that flavonoids are flavor. I don't know where that came from, but you know, in most cultures that you look at, and again, cuisines, you know, the difference between a doctor and a chef, there was none. The best chefs were the doctors.
Yeah.
And that's food as medicine. That's in every corner of the world, except here. Western medicine is, you know, so divorced from that. So holy shit, we have a lot to learn.
So we're doing this.
I'm looking, you know what I'm looking at? The reason I just got to that is I'm looking, you're sitting next to a revolution. You don't even know it. I should point the camera at that thing. That's called spinach lettuce.
Oh.
And so that's from a former Monsanto breeder who was so fed up with the drive towards profits, but also towards nutritionalists, romaine and iceberg, which is 95% of lettuce market, as you know. And he couldn't get Monsanto to understand the opportunity that was out there for the #1 vegetable eaten in the United States, salad, and the fact that we have a nutrition crisis in the United States. And what if, very obvious idea, especially lettuce breeders, what if we could breed nutrition into lettuce and have that become the vehicle for mineralization of vitamins and minerals and all the things that we need more of, and fiber that we need more of in our bodies. And so he quit and he started his own breeding business, and now he's breeding romaines and icebergs that are loaded with nutrition and flavor is what I stumbled upon. They're all stupefyingly delicious. And so what you're looking at is a romaine that was actually an offshoot. It was what they call the sports. I mean, it was really a genetic mutation from a couple of romaines that he was playing around with, and he noticed it, put a fence around it, saved the seed, selected, and here we are 10 years later. And it looks exactly like a head of spinach, but it's an open romaine. And the reason I'm saying it's so important to be open is that it's allowing the photosynthesis to happen, so that the green, the rich green, is not just on the outer leaves, which we're usually peeling off and throwing in the garbage, and then the rest of it is water, but you've got full nutrition. And this is something that is so delicious. I want to get out into the world. It doesn't belong just here.
I'll make sure I include a picture.
I'll get you a picture.
Yeah.
It is a stunner.
Yeah.
And it's just the kind of thing where, the industry says in Salinas, which is where he is, in the belly of the beast, says, oh, that'll never work. There's no market for it. And you go to the market people, they say, oh, growers will never grow that. And it's just like, okay, that's a circular something right there.
Right.
So we're going to try and make a stab at getting it out into the world, because its yield is fabulous. You know, fabulous. This is not meant for, you know, a small bespoke farm. It's really modern genetics with huge nutrition. Exciting.
Yeah.
You know what I love about that, especially as I'm looking at it, is I just got back from visiting him in his Willy Wonka field of lettuces, which just it's breathtaking to see the diversity in lettuce. And yet, as I'm walking through the whole field, I'm thinking, lettuce is the most lawyered up vegetable in our refrigerator. You know, you can't, 70%, did you know 70% of lettuce genetics are owned? 70%. Patented. So what he has to do to get around that, to get spinach lettuce and everything else I was looking at, is mind blowing. You know, it's just, I was thinking about, it's like me cooking in my kitchen and reaching for an ingredient and having a lawyer tap me on the hand and say, you can't use that. You can't use that. That's owned. That's what he deals with. 70% of lettuce genetics. So it's even more incredible that he's able to produce this stuff.
Yeah. This owning of life is very.
Well, that's a whole nother kit and caboodle right there, man.
It's a whole other kit. Let me go back to flavor for a minute. Taste. You and I have shared a lot of intersection with Hugh and Lisa Kent and Kingrove. Yeah. And I know
you got me involved with them.
I did.
You had me send that. That was a revelation.
Yeah, a revelation.
And I know blueberries. Yeah. You know, I know. It's not like I'm like, oh, it tastes something. I know blueberries. Never had something like that.
I know. And we just finished another season, and you know, we have a little bowl left in our fridge. And
so do I. I'm saving a little bowl. It's same with me. I was like, I can't. I put a tape around it, and my kids aren't touching it.
But we have a lot of frozen berries coming. Yeah. But so. What did you learn? You've been down, you visited the farm, and what's more, you sent a bunch of chefs down.
Oh yeah, they had to learn that, yeah. No,
to the farm in Florida.
Yeah, no, had to learn. That's the only way. You got to see that up close. I'll tell you what I learned, and it's probably not what it's not what you're thinking, which is, forget about the whole hydroponic disgrace and the USDA and organic, all of that. You cover that better than anyone. It's, to me, the obsession that I have with genetics being paramount. You know, we talk a lot about soil, but actually I spent a lot of my day with row 7 looking at genetics.
Yeah.
Now, as I have matured with row 7, I'm also seeing that you can have all the genetics in the world. If you don't have the right farming, and you definitely, if you don't have organic, but certainly even good organic farming, you're not going to express those genetics, so forget it. So you actually now are really in the farming business too. But where I really had a breakthrough was at Hugh's place, because 2 things. Number one, the genetics are pretty work a day. Like the best blueberries it has in there is a variety called Sweetgrist, which is very good, but it's not like over the moon. There are other varieties that pack more flavor, and it's a big producer, which means the vine is giving up a lot of its nutrition, but it's now dispersed over a very good yield, which generally means that the berry tastes a little bit weaker, generally, I think. Probably the same with tomatoes, no?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this trade-off between yield and flavor. But what Hugh didn't so much teach me as knock my socks off was to see that he was growing this variety and many others from the university at astounding flavor, on top of the fact that if I walked, you've been to the farm, if you walk a quarter mile that way, you're in sand. Right. You're just in sand. I mean, nothing grows, you know? And then you come back to Hugh and he's built up soil. He's built soil. And that is what's igniting. So you've got this thing where soil in a natural habitat, soil habitat is not that great. He argues with me a little bit, but a quarter mile, it's sand. And then
sand when he started at his place.
Yes, right. And so he built it up. He's saying that it has alluvial, or what? No, what was it before, where it has a lot of fossilized whatever down there? I don't understand it, because sand, to me, you can't grow. I mean, it looked really empty. And then yes, he built up this environment, and to the point where the richness of the soil community is taking what genetics are in this variety, in a couple of these varieties is growing, and expressing them to their full extent. And it's just a very good lesson about the tug between genetics and environment. I mean, it's always G by E. Which is more? And I'm a genetic guy now because of what I've learned, but I don't know. I'm starting to waver back to soil again because of him.
Well, and it's not just good yields and great flavor. It's also astonishing resistance, not just to disease, but to insects.
Insects, it's unbelievable.
Down there,
that whole story is
his neighbors 5 miles away
spraying
are
everything
every 5 days, prophylactically, because otherwise they will get wiped out. And Hugh hasn't sprayed, Lisa, they haven't sprayed anything in years. And the same insects are there. It's just that they never become a problem.
Right. They never become predominant, and therefore
they always have a balanced ecosystem.
Yeah.
And occasionally something will surge up, and he'll be scared. And if he talks to the county agent, they say, "You need to spray
right away.
Heavy." Yeah. And he goes, "I can't do that. That's I'm organic." And they go, "Well, you better find something else to do." And he's seen it happen over and over, that this balance is there, and it's getting better. It's getting better with time, the longer he's in with this perennial crop.
Exactly. And there you are. There's the improvement of the ecological functioning, the resilience, the strength. It's just astounding. Can you imagine if we actually invested some money in that kind of research? Can you imagine?
Amazing. When you consider how much money we invest in the wrong research.
For 60 years, how much money has gone into the other thing. No wonder everyone has a fucking solution, because that's all they know.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a hippy-dippy person to believe in the fact that we are just underserved in science. And that right there is a great example of what's possible. It really hurts when you think about it, what's there. I mean, they're amazing. They really are amazing.
Yeah. Even if we just got 7% of the USDA research budget for organic, because we're 7% of the food sold.
Right.
Imagine what that would be.
Amazing.
Huge.
Amazing.
Huge.
You're right, because the genetics on those things are not. There's another layer to the astounding. It's that the genetics of what he's growing are not grown in an organic environment. He's taking a conventional genetics and throwing them. That's like you and me being thrown into a fight with one hand tied behind our back.
Right.
That's just incredible.
Yeah.
Again, that says how strong that environment is. Oh, just really amazing.
So before we leave taste, is there anything else? Oh, just one thing that's interesting about that project. You had a tasting. Hugh brought up blueberries for your team to taste.
Yeah, hands down, he won. I mean, that versus the hydroponic is really, and that's why I want all the cooks to taste it. We were unanimous. Twice, we had 2 tastings, twice. It's very easy to tell when it's side by side. When it's not side by side, I don't know.
Yeah.
You get dumb when it's not side by side. You can be convinced of a lot of things. You get affected by the environment. You're with friends, you're with family, you're serving blueberries, you're like, oh, it's okay. But boy, you put it side by side. I wouldn't feed that to my family, the hydros,
Yeah, no, that was great. And now the next step is to test those same batches, which are now frozen, for nutrition.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where that goes. Dr. Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually just wrote me, so I got to tell Hugh that we're on our way here.
Good.
It's very exciting. And I want to get Stefan Van Vliet involved too, and I have a call with him.
Great. I'm very excited about this because, if we see that there's an alignment between the nutritional testing and the taste testing of these very refined pallets.
Yeah, we got it. I know.
It's good. And we'll do some testing for pesticide residues too.
I can't wait, because that's going to be the big.
Would you rather have the one that tastes best that has no pesticide residues?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the big one. I'm so excited. You're doing God's work, Dave.
Before you go,
yeah,
this is it. I promise. Joan Gussow, our dear friend, died this year, and you're speaking tomorrow. But I wonder if you'd speak right now and just. Not everybody knows who Joan was, of course.
Yeah.
And she really was significant in my mind, and she was the first in many places to say it. You know, I think it was Michael Pollan actually who said, every time I think I came up with a pretty good idea.
Joan said it first.
Joan had already said it.
Yeah. And I couldn't say that more strongly. For me personally, what you just saw today, and I'm going to say for those who didn't understand where you were a part of chefs and farmers showing and tasting the outside world, the experiments that we're doing that furthers the environmental enrichment of this place, and the farmer's pocketbook by giving an economy, and the cooks by getting excited around an idea that's important to farmers and create a food culture around it for healthfulness. So I think, as you saw, almost every table had nutrition analysis of what we were doing. We're bringing in a lot of scientists to get that. Stefan Van Vliet, one of them, but we want to prove that what we're tasting is at the highest level, but also the nutrition follows. And it's, Dave, it has been the through line, always consistent, same. Now, what I just said, what you just looked at, is really an ode to Joan. I mean, that was her idea. And we said it earlier, and it's worth repeating over and over, the correspondence between good food that's good for you and grown in the right way and improves an environmental niche is truly healthy food. And she was saying that, you know, in the 70s. And I feel like we are just waking up to that, but not yet, because as you said, people are leaving that out of the definition. So Joan's wisdom, as much as I think when I read these odes to Joan after she died, a lot of it was, you know, Joan was saying this thing for a long time and only people are now recognizing. Actually, I think Joan's wisdom is going to become even more important, prevalent, acknowledged 20 years from now. Here I am back to our 20-year conversation from now. I think she will look back on it in the way we look back on Sir Albert Howard, actually. That's right. I really believe that. You know, Sir Albert Howard wasn't Sir Albert Howard until many, many years later. And he's sort of the godfather of organic. I think she's going to be the godmother of this idea that organic food nutrition has to be at the same nexus. And it's a very powerful idea. Intuitively, you could say, well, we understand that, but we don't. And we need a wholesale reevaluation of what healthy food is. And it has to start with soil. And she nailed it. So I hope I can, if anything, I mean, she was the best influence on me. By the way, you know, she was the original consultant for this project. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know
her
that.
And Michael and Elliot. She was part of the brilliant fertile dozen, we called them. But and what she said absolutely affected me greatly. And I'm the beneficiary of that wisdom, as you can see. So are my chef, my cooks. It's great.
So are we all.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
Dan,
you.
Thank you so much.
Man. That was great talking to you. Love talking to you, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.